Hey, quilting friends, and welcome back. Now, last week I was chatting about my Cali & Co. fabric line, which I have the bundle right here. If you missed that video, I will be sure to have it linked in the description box below so that if you want to see a little bit more about these fabrics, you can. But today it's going to be all about the new quilts. Last week, if you watched that video, you saw my Barnstar 8 quilt pattern. So I thought we would kick things off and talk about this quilt in a little bit more detail. And then I have 4 more quilts to share with you, so stick around. Barnstar 8 is the 8th Barnstar pattern in my series of Barnstar quilts. You can see one of the other Barnstar quilts over here. This is Barnstar 4, and tucked behind us here, we have Barnstar 6. So these have been a lot of fun to design, these little 40-inch square Barnstar quilts. So as I said, Barnstar 8 featuring Cali & Co. fabric. These are all 40-inch square quilt patterns, and you will find the quilt patterns over in my Etsy shop in either PDF or paper pattern versions, whichever you prefer. Today we're just going to be showing them up close. I'll show you the quilting. Love the quilting on this one, and I will be sharing my binding choices and backing fabrics with you also, so that if you want to make any of these quilts, you can see exactly how I chose to finish mine. Let me take this quilt down because I want to show you the details on the quilting and all of the other good things. And this is Barnstar 8 up close. I love the quilting on this one. It is called Lattice Crosshatch, and it is by So Shabby Quilting. As with my other trunk show videos, I will have links to all of the quilting designs we use to quilt these quilts, so you can find that information below. And my quilter for all of these quilts is David Hurd of Quilting by David, and I will also have his website linked below as well. For this quilt, I wanted to highlight the rainbow of colors that we have in Cali & Co., plus the beautiful blues. The blues in this line are some of my favorites, and so I thought highlighting that shade in the star points was such a pretty thing to do. The other thing I really like about the Cali & Co. collection is it has wonderful, brightly colored, low volume prints. If we can have that, bright low volumes doesn't make sense, but I think you see what I mean when you look at this print. So I used that to frame out these star points. I'm going to show you the backing is the little blueprint from the line. There are such beautiful low volume prints in this line, and I just loved using them for backings and obviously for backgrounds where possible. The binding is the dot print, no stripe in this line, which is unusual for a Coriander Quilts fabric line, but this dot works really well. The other thing to keep in mind is that in my Coriander Colors line of fabric, there is this same shade of purple in a stripe. So if you are missing that stripe, you can pull that from Coriander Colors, which comes out in June. Cali & Co. fabrics come out in November. So they're shipping pretty close together, about, I don't know, what is that, five months apart or so. So you could easily pull that stripe if you wanted to. There is also a light gray stripe, which I think would work really well with Cali & Co. So a light gray stripe in Coriander Colors that you could use if you wanted to as well. That is the details here on this Barnstar quilt. Like I said, this is the 8th in the series, so I will have bundles of not only the set of patterns that I'm showing today, a little bit of a reduced price bundle in my Etsy shop, but I will have some Barnstar bundles. I currently have a 1 through 4 bundle. And with the release of this 8th Barnstar pattern, I am going to have a 4 through 8 bundle, 5 through 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, yes, 5 through 8 bundle. So you can purchase the first 4 as a bundle and the second set of 4 as a bundle if you wished. Let's move on to another quilt pattern. Hanging behind me, I have Like a Charm. This quilt finishes at 67 by 80 inches, and just like the name implies, it uses 2 charm packs. With this lineup of quilt patterns, I have a charm pack friendly quilt, and the Barnstar quilt is a yardage based quilt, so you're purchasing yardage for this one. And then I have a jelly roll quilt, a layer cake quilt, and a fat eighth friendly quilt that I will be sharing with you as well. Let's go ahead and take this quilt down and take a look at it closer. The quilting on this is probably one of my favorite quilting designs that I have had used on a quilt recently. In fact, this whole roundup of quilts has some really neat quilt patterns that we have not used before. So I'm really excited about the way they turned out. So let's just get right into looking at that. And here is what Like a Charm looks like up close. I love the quilting design on this quilt. I had first seen it used on an all solids quilt in a much larger scale. And I thought that is a quilting motif that we are going to have to use because it turned out so pretty. I think it works really well on this quilt. The scale is almost the same size as the charm squares are when they're finished here in the quilt. And I think it just highlights this so nicely. The solid that I have used here is Motabella Solid in the color Ruby Ice. This is the white on white dot print from Cali & Co. Let's move to our borders here. We have a double border on this quilt that you can see here. I used the same binding choice as this print right here. And for the backing, it is this beautiful aqua little print. This is one of my more favorite prints in this collection. I like so many of them. You'll hear me say that probably more than once in this video. This is my favorite print, and it's not going to be the same fabric. So if you hear me say it again, don't be surprised. I think there are a lot of really nice prints that work so well in so many different ways. These mix and match really nicely with some of my previous collections, and I bet you're going to pull a lot of these fabrics to mix in with fabric lines from other designers as well. It's just a really fun collection to mix and match, and you've got that whole rainbow of color, which means you can probably find some shade in this fabric line that you are just really going to enjoy. Let's move on to the quilt behind me. This is Jelly Roll Jackpot. This is my Jelly Roll quilt for this collection. And as you can see, it is a scrappy, happy quilt. This would also be a great scrap busting quilt if you wanted to use up some of your scraps. There's a lot of smaller sized pieces in here, 2.5-inch rectangles. We have 2.5-inch squares, and then we have some different flip and stitch corners. So a great scrap busting quilt. Quilting on this is one of my favorites. You've seen us use this a few times. I think on the last, I want to say 2 or 3 Jelly Roll quilts I've shared here on the channel, I've used this quilting design because I love it for Jelly Roll quilts. I think it's so perfect. So we're going to look at that. And the background, I want to chat about that a little bit too, because there are some possibilities with backgrounds that you might not have considered. So I want to chat about that as well. And this quilting design is called Circles Nested. It's by Julie Hurt, and the scale on it is about the size of a quarter, and I think it just fits so nicely inside of this size that we get with Jelly Roll strips. And I love the way that looks. Now the background, I mentioned I wanted to chat about that. I don't know how well this is going to show on camera for you, but it is a white on white vine print, and it is from my Coriander Seeds line of fabric. Sometimes we forget that we have that whole collection of 10 white on whites in Coriander Seeds that we can also pull in and use for our backgrounds with any of my fabric lines or with other fabric lines also. It is the color that it would match would be Motabella Solid in the color Off-White, which is 9900-200. So I know many of us use that color for the backgrounds in our quilts when we're pulling a solid. If you want something with just a little extra spice, you might consider using a white on white fabric. So I have pulled for some of these new quilts some of those backgrounds to use, and they work beautifully. You will also see that I used it in the narrow border here. A little bit of a white on white just to separate all of these bright scrappy colors from the border. The border is that pretty red print. I used the white cherry print for my binding, which is a little unusual for me. I don't as often use a lighter color for my bindings, but I liked the way it framed out that red, and it kind of mimicked this little bit of a border here. So I went with that for this one. And then you see the backing choice is one of the white prints from the line. And that is Jelly Roll Jackpot, a fun to piece pattern. It is 70 by 70, and yardage requirements are pretty simple. You will always find the yardage requirements in my Etsy shop listings. So if you ever wonder what fabrics you need to purchase in advance of purchasing the pattern, you can find it there. So yardage requirements here and there as well. Let's go ahead and move on to the next quilt. This next one is the Moda kit quilt for this collection. So if you like purchasing those beautiful boxes that Moda does, that have all of the fabrics you need to complete the quilt top, as well as your binding fabrics, this is the one for you. The name of this quilt is All Around Star. It is a 68 by 68 inch square quilt. And again, scrappy and happy. If you are not purchasing the kit and you're just purchasing the pattern, this is another one that would be a great scrap buster because we've got a lot of these smaller squares. We have half square triangles, and those are just wonderful for utilizing some of those scraps you might be interested in busting out of your sewing room. Let's take a look at this one up close as well. All Around Star is the layer cake quilt for this collection, and I mixed up all of those scrappy prints with some more of that blueprint that you know by now I love. This is the same print that I used in the star points for Barn Star 8, one of my favorites from the collection. See, I told you I was going to say that again. I've got too many favorites in this collection, but one fun fact I wanted to share with you is that the background that I used here is from Coriander Seeds, but it's the same little ditzy print that you see here in the blue. So that means we've got another great background option from Coriander Seeds. You saw the viney print from Coriander Seeds in Jelly Roll Jackpot. We've got the pretty little ditzy print that mixes beautifully. And then we have the white on white polka dot that I designed specifically for the collection. So lots of mix and match background options when we add in those Coriander Seeds options into our choices. Okay, let us move on to our border, which is this beautiful, low volume, bright, happy, scrappy print. Can I say that that's one of my favorites too? How many favorites do I have so far just in this video alone? I think they're adding up. For the backing, I chose this little print that you see here. I think it works beautifully with the blues in the quilt. And then we need to chat about this quilting a little bit yet. So, a whimsical quilting motif. It is the Grape Soda quilting design by So Shabby Quilting. This is another new one that was used for this collection of quilts, and I think it turned out so pretty. Definitely a more whimsical design. And with all of those scrappy brights, I think that works really well. It's always fun to choose new quilting designs to try out. And Melissa of So Shabby Quilting has really been having some fun ones that keep popping up in my Instagram feed. So you might be seeing me using some of hers. I think the last quilt that I'm going to be showing you, actually hanging right here behind me, utilizes another one of her designs, and I just think she has been knocking it out of the park. I've been loving all of her quilting designs we've been using. So let's go ahead and chat about this quilt. This is Dashing. This is one that you may be familiar with because if you look over here to my left, we see the original Dashing. It was the very first pattern that I released with my Coriander Quilts pattern line. It's a fat eighth friendly quilt. It finishes at 60 by 72. And I decided to remake it, bring it back with new pattern cover, updated instructions, and I just think it turned out so pretty. So it's definitely kind of nostalgic to see my first quilt pattern for my pattern line brought back in Cali and Co. And you're gonna love the quilting on this one. I was bragging up Melissa, and you're gonna get to see more of that up close because her quilting design is so pretty. So let's take that down and I will show you what that looks like up close. And here is that quilting design up close. It's called Stella. And as I said, the quilting motif was designed by Melissa of So Shabby Quilting. And I love this one. I love an orange peel. And this is sort of an echoed, almost orange peel, almost daisy. I don't know what you would call it, but it works really well for this quilt. The scale that David chose to quilt it at is such a nice small size that gives a lot of dense quilting, and I think it's very pretty. The background fabric here is the white on white dot from Cali and Co. We'll slide her over, check out that binding. I went with the gray floral here. This is another time where you might like to pull the light gray stripe from Coriander Colors to use if you are missing that stripe. I like the way these small prints frame out. They're small enough that you don't lose a lot of the detail. Sometimes when we choose larger prints for bindings, we don't get to see the detail in the fabric, but the scale on these florals really does allow us to pull just about any of them to use for bindings. I think this little ditzy print would show up very nicely. You can see it over here in the pink, the blue. I think that is a great choice for bindings from the fabrics. The dots, I think, are really pretty. But really, if any of the prints catch your eye, they're going to work pretty nicely for your binding. For the backing, I went with this print here, another one of those colorful low volume prints. I think that works beautifully. And that is Dashing in Cali & Co. So that is the lineup of quilt patterns. So we have 4 new ones. We've got the Dashing Remix, so 5 patterns made in Cali & Co fabrics. All of the new patterns can be found over in my Etsy shop right now. And I mentioned that I have a Barnstar bundle. I will also have all of the Cali & Co patterns available in a bundle as well. So if you wanted to get these 5 patterns in a bundle with a little bit of a savings, you could certainly do that. I will have my Etsy shop linked below. And then if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I will be happy to answer questions. If I didn't cover something that you wished I had, or if I failed to mention something, let me know. Or if you just have any questions about the fabric line or the new quilts, give me a holler and I will do my best to answer those for you. Also, over on my blog today, I have more pictures of the quilts. So if you want to see photographs, I wish I could say photographs better. If you want to see photographs, you can take a look over there on the blog. For those, that is also linked down below. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.